Hello everyone, I'm so excited to talk to you about Blitz.js. For most of the past 4 years, I was like this guy, happily building full-stack React apps. I was fully content to put up with the complexity and struggle required to do so, and I did that because I loved building user interfaces with React more than any other way. But the honeymoon ended, and I became increasingly frustrated with everything that I would have to do for configuring and setting up libraries and tools and services just to get to ground zero before I could start building features. And I grew weary of the API layer and dealing with REST APIs, GraphQL APIs, data fetching, the whole enchilada. Anything that got in the way of me building features slowly depleted my morale. I really wanted to love full stack development again. I wanted to be extremely productive again. I wanted to focus on building awesome features instead of all the boring stuff that made me want to quit work early. So I decided enough was enough, and I set out to build the best possible developer experience for building full stack React apps. So there were two things that I had to have to achieve the developer experience that I was going for. Number one, it had to be monolithic. So monolithic means that there's only one thing to reason about when you're thinking about the application. So conceptually, there's one thing to develop and one thing to deploy. Secondly is I wanted to get rid of the API layer because the API layer in React apps is the biggest source of complexity and struggle and headache and heartache and every other bad thing. It's just, I had to get rid of it because I got into web development through Ruby on Rails. And in Ruby on Rails, by default, everything is server rendered. And so there's no API. And it's so simple. You don't have to deal with that API layer. It's so much nicer than where we've been used to. So how can you get rid of the API layer? Well, the only way I knew at the time was to do server-side rendering like Rails. And in fact, my very first announcement about Blitz.js at the beginning of last year, 2020, the announcement, the prototype that I had for Blitz was server-side rendered. And people loved it anyways. They were excited about it. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do it. But as we got into it, I decided that I didn't love it. It wasn't awesome. And so me and the other early Blitz contributors were, talking and discussing about what would the architecture look like, what are the possibilities. And one day I was laying in a hammock in Thailand pondering this. And I asked myself, what would this look like if it was easy? And suddenly I had this picture flood my imagination, and I could just see myself writing a function that runs on the server. And inside that function, I would talk to a database or whatever else. And then I would import that function directly into my front-end components. And it would just magically work. And I was like, wow, now that is really cool. Like, wow, that is awesome. Like, is that even possible? Like, what in the world is this magic? But turns out, oh yeah, it is possible. And it is now the flagship feature in Blitz.js. And people tell us that it literally makes them 5 to 10 times more productive. All right, so let's back up and give you some more context around Blitz and what it is and how, like what it really looks like. So I'm assuming most of you have heard about Next.js, but in case you haven't, Next.js is a really awesome hybrid framework for React. And Next is great because it's very flexible. So on a page-by-page basis, you can decide whether that page is client-side rendered, server-side rendered, or statically generated, like Gatsby, for example. And then it also has server-side API routes so that you can do backend functionality. So it's really good. But if you've ever used it to build a full stack app, you'll know that you have to bring a bunch of your own code and integrations and libraries to be able to build an actual full stack app because Next.js is very minimal. So nevertheless, we decided that Next.js would be the perfect foundation to build a batteries included framework around Next. So Blitz is a fork of Next.js that adds power features for building full stack apps. Now, I do want to emphasize that although we have forked Next.js, we keep up to date. So we merge in every new Next.js release, we merge into Blitz, and we will continue doing so for as long as Blitz users want us to. And currently, the fact that Blitz is a fork of Next.js, is built on Next.js, is like a very attractive feature for most of our users. So most of us really like the ergonomics of that, and so that's what we plan to do. It's really awesome because every new thing that Next.js adds, we just get for free, like image optimization. We just merge in the next release, and voila, Blitz has image optimization. So it allows us to focus on higher level DX things, and Next.js kind of focuses on the lower level. So it works out quite nice. All right, secondly is that you'll usually see Prisma inside a Next app. Prisma is a next generation ORM for Node and TypeScript. And Prisma is really awesome because it provides you kind of two key features that takes care of the entire database layer for you. So number one is defining your database schema and managing migrations. It does that for you. And then secondly is it has a JavaScript or TypeScript client, actually also Go and other languages if you want. And it's a really nice client to talk to your database without using SQL. So here is what a Prisma schema looks like. It is a GraphQL-like syntax that you use to define your models and the fields on those models. And then you run Prisma migrate, and Prisma will automatically update your database and generate migrations, whatever it needs to do to make sure you're happy. And I just noticed that there's a little kind of a alignment issue. How annoying. All right. Anyways, so the second feature is that database client I talked about. And here's an example of what it looks like. So you can import your database, and then you just call db.user or db.project or whatever the name of your model is, and then find many, update, create, delete, etc. And you can see it's really nice kind of interface to use. And with TypeScript, it generates all the types for this. So this client is fully typed, which means that like the inputs to your database are fully typed and the outputs. And it's super awesome. And even with plain JavaScript, you get autocomplete. All right, so let's take a gander through the Blitz foundational principles. Full stack and monolithic, which I've already touched on. API not required. Convention over configuration. Convention over configuration means that you shouldn't have to configure something just to start using it. It means that it should just start working by default, and then later you can configure it if you need. So to give you kind of a perspective, the opposite of convention over configuration would be configuration over convention, in which a prime example would be Webpack. All right, loose opinions. So what this means is that we have opinions and recommendations for the best way to do various things, but for the most part, we do not enforce it. And so, for example, in contrast to Ruby on Rails, in Ruby on Rails, it's very difficult to go off the rails. But in Blitz, we make it much easier to do so. So you get a lot of these power features and recommendations, but you also have the freedom and flexibility to just kind of blaze your own trail. We don't want to get in the way of JavaScript developers. Number 5, easy to start, easy to scale. So we want it to be awesome for just little side projects and things, but all the way to, building the next $1 trillion business. And we're optimizing Blitz for the entire spectrum. Stability, we care a lot about stability. And once we get to 1.0, we will implement some type of stable and predictable release cycle. And last but not least, community over code. I care a lot about our community, and I am very intentional about it. I have been since day one, and I care a lot about it being just a really friendly, warm, welcome place. And so far it is. Like, our community is amazing. Tons of people are in our Discords helping answer each other's questions, contributing on GitHub. And it's an awesome place. I love our community and our maintainers, and I would love to have you join as well. So what does Blitz actually look like? How does it actually affect your life? Well, the first thing you'll notice is that all the boring work is already done for you. So things like setting up folder structure, linting, code formatting, Git hooks, testing, database, forms is already set up for you. You get to choose which form library you want. We ask you that when you create a new app. And then user sign up, login, and log out is already set up for you by default. So you never have to do authentication ever again if you use Blitz.js. It's super awesome. I will show it to you in a few minutes. And then also reset password flow is already in there by default. You don't even have to build it or configure it. Actually, you do have to connect the email provider, but like all the hard stuff is done for you. All right, so we have a zero API data layer. You remember how I was laying in the hammock in Thailand and I had that picture in my imagination of importing server code into the front end? That's what we call the zero API data layer. So what we do is we abstract the API into a compile step. Now, just like serverless still has servers, zero API still has an API. We just put it into a compile step. So as a developer, you don't have to worry about it. You just write code that runs on the server, import those functions in your front end, and you don't have to mess with REST or GraphQL or anything like that. And you'll see that in Blitz. It's called queries and mutations is how that works. All right, let's look at some live code. All right, so here I have just created a brand new Blitz app in my terminal. I ran Blitz new. It asked me a few questions and then it created a bunch of files. Now, this is a lot of files, so don't be overwhelmed. Don't be intimidated. Just take your time to go through the files, understand what they are. And the reason there's so many is that we are not optimizing for just like a super simple hello world. Like this is there's only like one file and it works. Because in that case, if you go to build something, a real application, then suddenly you have to add tons of files in there just to, get something working fully. And so we're optimizing for getting real work done, and we're giving you all the files that you need, that most people are going to need. So the biggest chunk of this is authentication, login component, sign up component, things like that. So, but the nice thing is that this is standardized. So almost every Blitz app will have this kind of very similar setup. And so once you learn it once, you can reuse that knowledge for any Blitz app that you or anyone else creates will be very familiar to us. And so it's just, that knowledge transfers really nicely. We are working on a minimal new app option. So it'll ask you when you create a new Blitz app and it'll say, hey, do you want, the full enchilada, or do you want just like a bare bones thing without all this? And in that case, the bare bones will be very similar to what you get with Next.js. All right, so we installed dependencies, and then we also set up a SQLite database for you by default because it's already on everybody's computer. And so right away you have a database. We do recommend you switch to Postgres or MySQL for production. All right, so now we can run Blitz dev. And now we can go and load this in the browser. All right, so here's what you see. Just kind of, general getting started page. But what's awesome is that there is a sign up button here. So we can click on sign up. And just create a user, and voila, we are signed in. We have a user ID of 1 and a user role. Now, isn't that awesome? Like, we did zero work and we're already off to the races. Log out, reset password, everything. All right, so now let's see what it's like how would you build a feature, right? How would you add some code? So we're gonna kill the server, and let's say we're building a project management app. We're gonna say Blitz generate all, and all is like what type of files we want to generate all of them. Project is the name of the model, so like a project manager, and then we're going to give it a name attribute that is a string, and we could add more attributes there if we wanted to. So we'll do generate, and this generates all the files that we need for all the basic CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. So it has all your backend and your front end code already generated for you, and it adds the project model to your database. So we're going to say, yes, we want to migrate the database, and Prisma takes care of that for us. All right. So, now let's start the server. Get back and reload. All right. And so now we go down to projects. And there's the list of projects here, but we haven't created one. So let's go ahead and create one. And let's say just a conference. Okay. And now, bam, we have already created a project. This is data that's being loaded from the database at project/1. We can edit that. We can delete, etc. Go back to the list, and it's just all the code is there ready for you to, customize the styling. Isn't that cool? All right, so let's just look quickly at the code for this. So we have a get project query. So this is the server-side code, and what we have here is, I'm just reformatting the code slightly. The main thing is that we're exporting a default function, and we have the signature is first argument is input, and the second is context, and then returns some result. So this is the signature. So the input arguments is whatever, it's all the arguments function come into that one, and the context is provided by middleware, which we use like for authentication, and then you just return the result, and that's the signature. Okay. But by default, we scaffold code out with this resolver utility, which uses a pipe, a functional pipe. So it pipes the output of one function into the input of the next, and it allows you to chain them together nicely, and it handles a bunch of TypeScript magic for you here in Blitz, which is why we do it for you. Or JavaScript, that works great too. So the first thing in the pipe is we use Zod, which is a schema validation library similar to Yup, but better. And we create a schema that says, hey, the input to this needs to have an ID that is a number. If it doesn't, then it's going to throw an error. And then secondly, we are going to ensure that the user is logged in. Okay, now we could also add a role, and that would ensure that the user is not only logged in, but has the role of admin. For now, we'll leave it as this. Okay, and then we have the kind of the real heart of the business logic here. It's just a simple function that takes in the input argument, like I showed up here, first input. And in this case, it's the ID, and we already know this ID exists because we validated it up here. And then we call Prisma, db.project.findFirst, pass in the ID, and it returns a project. All right, and then we can just return that project, and that's it on the server code. So let's go see how we use that on the front end. Okay, so this is a project page. So it's a normal like Next.js or Blitz page using normal React components. So we import that function we were just looking at, get project, and then we go down here in the component and pass it to use query hook, which comes from Blitz. Use query is built on top of a React query. And so it handles all the caching validation, refetching, retries, all that. It's super, super cool. And then it just returns a project. And that's it. No REST, no GraphQL. It just works. Isn't that awesome? And then we have a similar thing for a mutation. So you can import delete project. We have a use mutation hook. And then you just call this function down here, like await, call the function, like an async function. And it just works. You're welcome. All right. Get back to my slides and have just a little bit more to show you. So this is our routes manifest in Blitz. It's super awesome. This is something Next.js doesn't have. And it's fully type-safe routing. So it decouples your links from the URL. So instead of linking to the static URL path of a page, you can give it the name of that page. And that allows you to move the page around without having to update all your links. And it's fully type safe with TypeScript or JavaScript. You get autocomplete. It's super, super nifty. Something else we have is Blitz Recipes. And so how many of you enjoy the process of installing and configuring third-party dependencies? Anyone? Not seeing any hands. Well, the good news is that with Blitz, you never have to do that ever again. Well, as long as there's a recipe for it, but you can install with one command any third-party library, and it'll set it up already for you. In fact, you can write your own recipes, and it can be any type of arbitrary code. So an example is you can run blitz install chakra UI, and that will automatically install all the dependencies, any configuration files, and it will automatically go into your code and update the root of your application to include the theme provider, the context provider. We also have Blitz Console, which is like a Rails console. It's a super powered REPL that automatically imports your code, and it's easy to run one-off database commands, things like that. So we also have a way to easily add social login via Twitter, Facebook, etc. using the passport adapter. We automatically serialize and deserialize dates, maps, sets, objects, all that stuff. So you don't have to think about it. It just works. You can deploy to a server or serverless. We have first-class custom server support, and including for TypeScript. And then we're also database agnostic. So you don't have to use Prisma. You can bring any database, anything you want. Blitz is very flexible. So we are late beta, nearing release candidate, expect a 1.0 by the end of the year. And we have thousands of companies all around the world using it in production. And we just recently passed 2,000 members in our Discord. So we have people using Blitz like Agolia, GraphCMS, universities, energy companies, startups, and students inside projects. So a lot of people are really finding Blitz to be just like the thing that they were looking for their entire lives, essentially. So this one guy said that he had been using Rails, professionally for 10 years. And now after just a few months with Blitz, he's already 10 times more productive than he ever was with Ruby on Rails. Now, if you go to this link, blitz.js.com/fame, you can see it'll take you to a Twitter thread where I have a bunch of comments from people who are using Blitz, and you can see what they think about it. So how can you try Blitz? Well, install the Blitz CLI using yarn or npm, and then run blitz new and give it the name of your application, and you'll be off to the races. All right, so Blitz is open source, and we need your help. We would love you to help contribute in any way that you would like. So we have, lots of different ways that you can contribute and help, docs, code, etc. This link at the bottom is the best place to go and kind of learn about how to contribute. But we have really awesome community. Alexandria, our lead maintainer now, super helpful. And so, yeah. Come say hi. Now, before I go, I want to mention my latest project that I'm working on, which is flightcontrol.dev. And it is an optimized hosting solution for Blitz and Next.js. And it's built for not only awesome DX developer experience, but also scalability. And it's just really good for startups and enterprises to run because it runs inside your own account. So definitely check it out if you want awesome Blitz or Next.js hosting. You can go there. We're not quite launched yet, but if just enter your email and you'll join the wait list, flightcontrol.dev. All right, so you can get started at Blitz.js.com. That's the central place to learn all about Blitz. And here's our Twitter handles. And last but not least, you can get free Blitz.js stickers. Woo! Because you're at a conference, right? So go to Blitz.js.com/stickers, enter your address, and we will send you free stickers anywhere in the world. Thank you so much. Cheers.